Her right arm was broken, the dining table violated, her honor trampled. But at the very moment the enemy sat in her late husband's chair, the clock struck 8s, and the storm did not come from the sky, but from a woman who was no longer afraid.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Martha Evans. I'm 67 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I used to believe that dignity was something you carried in your spine. Straight, silent, unyielding. That's what I taught myself during 39 years, 11 months, and 21 days as a trauma surgeon. You keep your back straight. You keep your hands clean. You save lives. You don't ask for thanks. And you sure as hell don't let anyone see you bleed. But tonight, I bled in front of them all. Not literally. The bandage on my arm had already dried, and the bruises hid beneath a beige cardigan I refused to remove. But the bleeding, the real kind, was in the silence that followed Kayla's words. My husband taught her a necessary lesson. She didn't even say it with malice. She said it like it was obvious, like it was math, like it was gravity, a fact of nature that a man like Damien could hit a woman like me, his wife's mother, and that somehow made sense. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat felt like it had been scraped with a scalpel. So instead, I stared at the plate in front of me, porcelain white, perfectly clean, not a single bite. No salad, no sides, not even a pity roll. Everyone else had been served. Their plates were full, drinks refreshed, napkins folded with performative southern charm. Mine had been placed in front of me like an insult, a ceremony without substance. The empty plate was not an accident. It was the message. Damien sat 2 chairs down, chewing with an open mouth. Grease shone on his lips. The duck had been overcooked. I could smell it. But that didn't stop him from tearing into it like it owed him something. When he caught me glancing his way, he smiled wide and lifted his glass. "To discipline," he said, as if he were proposing a toast. A few guests chuckled, awkward and thin. Most stayed quiet. One woman looked down at her lap. Another stared hard at her wine, like maybe she could drown in it. No one looked at me. I turned to Kayla. Her hands were delicate. She got those from me. And her nails were painted pale lilac, her favourite since college. She twirled her fork through green beans and cut neatly into her slice of duck, as if she hadn't just exiled her own mother to the far edge of the table like a cautionary tale. She didn't meet my eyes. And that's when it hit me. Not the pain, not the shame, not even the anger. No. It was the absence that hit hardest. The hollow space where a daughter's love should be. It was colder than Damien's blow, colder than this stale, over-air-conditioned room. I shifted slightly in my seat. The cast on my right arm felt heavy. My fingers, still swollen, twitched against the sling. My body was trained for resilience, years in ORs, years standing through 12-hour surgeries without rest. But this was a different kind of fatigue. I found myself staring at the old grandfather clock in the corner. Dark walnut wood, brass pendulum, a gift from my late husband on our 25th anniversary. The only man who ever understood silence the way I did. Tick, tock, tick. I heard it like a metronome, like a warning. 40 years I gave to medicine, I told myself. I saved lives. Babies with shattered skulls. Old men crushed in car wrecks. I held hearts in my hands, literally, and brought people back from the brink. But not her, not Kayla. I couldn't save her from him. From herself. That is the wound no scalpel can fix. Someone refilled Damien's wine. He didn't say thank you. just nodded, like a man used to being served. He made a loud show of chewing, and then said to the room, "You know, if Martha were really hungry, she'd speak up." More awkward laughter, the kind that cuts sharper than words. My eyes scanned the room. Marcus, my old neighbour, who once brought me lemon squares when my husband passed. Shonda, who'd served beside me at Grady Hospital for 2 decades. Even Bishop Lane, sitting near the window, eyes low. They all saw what was happening. None of them stopped it. But they were watching. That mattered. They were witnesses. And I knew something Damien didn't. See, I wasn't sitting here helpless. I wasn't broken. I was recording, memorizing, measuring blood loss. I was taking notes, the way I always did in the OR. Patient stable, blood pressure dropping, clock ticking. This was just the diagnosis. The surgery hadn't even begun. Damien leaned back, tapped his knife against his plate like it was a baton. "Come on, Doc. You're not going to guilt us into letting you eat, are you?" My mouth stayed closed. My spine still straight. Then he added, quieter, just for me. "You had a good run, but this is my house now." Wrong. Dead wrong. "This is not your house," I thought. "This is a place you've invaded. My walls, my table, my clock, my name on the lease, my husband's memory in every creaking floorboard. You don't own anything here, least of all me." But I didn't say any of that, not yet, because a surgeon doesn't speak in the middle of a procedure. She waits, she cuts when it counts. So I looked at him, just once, and gave him the smallest smile. Not warmth, not surrender. The kind of smile that belongs to a woman who has outlived worse. And I returned my eyes to the empty plate. Let them feast. Let them gloat. Let them believe they had won. They were all so busy watching the bleeding that they forgot. A surgeon knows exactly where the heart is. It happened 24 hours ago. Funny how time distorts when your bones are broken, not just the physical ones, but the ones made of trust. The hours stretch, then snap back in jagged loops. One moment, I was in my kitchen heating up water for tea. The next, I was staring up at my daughter's husband, his face red and close, and his voice full of entitlement. "You need to sign the transfer, Martha," Damien said, like he was asking me to pass the salt. I stood my ground. "It's not going to happen." He stepped closer. His cologne, that cloying synthetic musk, hit me first. Then came the smirk. He was wearing a charcoal blazer, no tie, the cuffs unbuttoned, casual arrogance. "This isn't a fight," he said. "It's just a formality. We both know Kayla's the one who'll take care of this place when you... fade." Fade. That word hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. "I'm not fading," I replied. "And this home doesn't belong to Kayla. It was in my name before she met you, before your last divorce, before your first DUI. You're not getting it." He blinked. Just once. Then his mouth curled. "See, I tried the polite way. I really did." What happened next was not a shove. It was a decision. He raised his hand and pushed me, not hard, not with rage, just enough to send me backward into the edge of the kitchen doorway. My right side hit the molding. A bolt of pain fired through my arm, so bright I saw stars. The sound was sickening, a snap like a pencil breaking in slow motion. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my wrist. My mind split in two. One part counting fractures, the other part trying not to scream. The worst part. She was there. Kayla. She didn't scream, didn't rush to me, didn't kneel down like she did when she scraped her knees at age 6 and begged me to kiss it better. No. She stood still, arms folded, expression flat as a blank chart. "Mum," she said, "you provoked him." Those words, my own daughter's voice, cold and matter-of-fact, hurt more than the fracture. more than the floor, more than the betrayal of bone. "You're taking his side," I said, breathless. "No," she replied. "I'm not taking sides. I'm just tired of you acting like everything needs to go through you. We're adults. We make our own choices now." I laughed, not out of humour, but out of disbelief. The sound that came out of me was ragged, ugly, something from deep inside. "I raised you to stand on your own 2 feet," I said. She looked down at me. "Exactly, and you hate that we finally did." Damien returned a moment later, tossing something metallic in his palm. My phone. He placed it on the kitchen island with a smirk, then slowly slid it toward himself. "You're not going to need this for a while," he said. He walked away. Kayla followed. The door closed behind them, and that's when the silence returned. Heavy, humid, almost sentient. I laid there for a long time, minutes, an hour, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of the thermostat, the whistle in my own lungs. What hurt most wasn't the bone. It was the knowing that I wasn't locked in by a man. I was locked in by my own blood. I shifted onto my side, teeth clenched. My legs still worked. I dragged myself across the floor, each inch a slow crawl of shame and fury. I made it to the hallway, then the bedroom. Inside the closet, third shelf, far back, was the emergency med kit. Morphine injector, sling, field wrap. Military grade. I'd packed it myself the year after my retirement, just in case. I'd always expected it might come in handy during a storm. Not for this. Not for my own damn family. I injected the morphine and waited. My vision dulled at the edges. But the clarity came where I needed it most. In my mind. Then I saw it. The old flip phone. God, I hadn't touched it in over 2 decades. The thing was covered in dust, shoved in a shoebox with my husband's old medals and a photo of me in scrubs after my first solo surgery. I stared at the phone like it was a gun, like pressing the button would detonate everything I'd buried. "You don't call someone like him unless you're ready for consequences," I told myself. The screen flickered to life, blue and harsh. 1 number, no name, just him. My thumb hovered. Then I pressed call. It rang once, then a click. A voice I hadn't heard since the funeral said, "Martha?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came. He spoke again, this time quiet and sharp. "I've been waiting 22 years for this call." My fingers gripped the phone. I inhaled through my teeth. "Help me," I said. "Come to the apartment. Tonight." No stammer. No explanation. I didn't need to justify my pain to a man who had once bled beside me on a hospital floor. He didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way," he said. "You saved my life. Now I return the favour." The line went dead. I sat there on the closet floor, phone still in hand, surrounded by shadows and broken promises. My cast ached. My mouth was dry. But something inside me had snapped back into place. Not my wrist. My will. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Something I had forgotten during the long years of motherhood, widowhood, and silence. When you save enough lives, you earn the right to call one back in. It was sometime past dusk when I opened my eyes again. The morphine had taken the edge off the pain, but not the weight. That weight, the one pressing down on my chest like a lead blanket, wasn't physical. It was the weight of knowing. The realization that something sacred between mother and daughter had been severed, and there would be no suturing it back. I blinked toward the dark ceiling. My breathing was shallow, the rhythm of a surgeon who knows too much about collapsed lungs. My right arm throbbed beneath its cast, A crude, temporary fix I'd managed myself with one hand, some gauze, and a compression wrap from the trauma kit. Not elegant, but effective. The rest of the house was silent. Not safe. Silent. There's a difference. My body begged me to lie still. But my mind started working like it always did when chaos took over. Step 1. Step 2. Step 3. Control the bleeding. Protect the airway. Regain the upper hand. So I moved. Cautiously. Deliberately. Like someone sneaking out of their own skin. I pushed myself upright, leaning against the closet wall. Every breath hurt. The morphine dulled the surface, but not the memory. I remembered the sound of the bone cracking, that wet, hollow pop. I remembered Kayla standing there, watching, not lifting a single finger to stop him. I remembered what she said. "You provoked him." My stomach twisted again, but there was no room left for grief. Not tonight. There was only one thing left to do: survive. And for that, I needed connection. I reached for the trauma kit again. Underneath the field dressings and expired adrenaline pens, I found it. The burner phone. It was black, plastic, a little sticky from age. I hadn't touched it in over 20 years. Not since Katrina. Not since Elias Monroe and I had spent 3 straight days in a war zone disguised as a hospital. I was the surgeon. He was the field medic. We saved 17 lives on a backup generator and a vow not to give up. The phone had survived floods, wind, and time. So had we. I turned it over in my hand, wiping dust away with the sleeve of my shirt. When I pressed the power button, it made a low mechanical hum, like it was waking up from a long sleep. The screen blinked. No SIM, no network. But it didn't need one. It was already programmed. One number, one line, one promise never spoken out loud. I hovered my thumb over the call button. A lifetime passed in that second. This wasn't a casual favor. This wasn't a neighbor with jumper cables. This was a blood oath between people who had seen the edge of death and walked away with smoke still in their lungs. I pressed call. It rang once. Then a voice, steady and unmistakably him. "Martha?" I didn't answer right away. My throat clenched. The last time I'd heard that voice, it had been over the casket of his brother, my husband. The 3 of us had made a pact once during residency that we'd never let each other fall. Turns out I was the one who fell the furthest, and the last to call for help. "I need you," I said. "I can't explain on the phone." A pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. "Is he there now?" he asked. "No, but he will be." Another pause. "Location?" I gave him the address. My address. The one on every tax bill, retirement document, and hospital commendation plaque. He repeated it back, word perfect. Then he said, "Don't leave. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Don't speak. Don't fight. Just sit." I closed my eyes. My hand trembled. "Elias," but he cut in gently. "You saved me once. I'm just returning the stitch." Then the line went dead, and the weight on my chest, it shifted, not gone, but no longer crushing. I slid the phone into my cardigan pocket and exhaled slowly. Then I began the crawl. My legs ached. My hips screamed. But I dragged myself from the closet, through the dark hallway, and into the bathroom. I flipped the light on with my left hand. The reflection in the mirror made me recoil. I looked like hell. But there was power in seeing it. The bruises beneath my cheekbone had begun to bloom, violent purples and sickly greens. My eyes were sunken. My lips still held a faint split. A surgeon knows when damage is cosmetic. This wasn't. I washed my face, rebraided my hair, one-handed and slow, changed my shirt. The blood-spotted one went in the trash. The clean one was soft, slate blue. My late husband always said it made me look like someone who didn't flinch. I needed that. I walked, slower now, toward the dining room, the place where it had happened, the place where I was made to sit like a ghost while they all feasted and laughed and watched me starve. The empty plate was still there. I sat down in front of it, let my hand rest gently beside it. The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock. 7:36 p.m., 24 minutes. The chair across from me, the one Damien always took, still had his jacket slung across it, bold, entitled. Like he believed the seat was already his. But tonight, that seat would burn, and I wouldn't lift a finger. I reached into the side drawer beneath the china hutch. There, next to some old matches and thank you cards I never sent, was a folded note I'd scribbled 2 years ago. In case of fire, call Monroe. I'd kept it all this time. Not out of fear, out of clarity, because some things you don't unlearn. How to hold a retractor, how to keep your voice calm in crisis, how to spot rot before it spreads, and how to cut, clean, and close. At exactly 7:48 p.m., I heard it. The first knock, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He would announce himself, as he always had. When I married David Evans, he built that dining room chair with his own 2 hands. Solid oak, curved arms, high back. It was old-fashioned and built to last. Just like him. He'd sit there at the head of the table every Sunday. The kids would pass the sweet tea. I'd bring out the roast. That chair wasn't just wood. It was memory, ritual, love. A throne for a man who never ruled, only led. After he died, I never let anyone sit there, not even Kayla, especially not Kayla. But tonight, Damien sat there like he'd bought it on clearance, slouched, one leg over the other, glass of wine in his ringed fingers. He talked too loudly, laughed too sharply, as if he wanted the echo of his voice to drown out everything I'd built in this house. He was eating, again. Braised duck, cold now, but still expensive enough to feel like a performance. He wiped his mouth with my linen napkins, the ones stitched by David's mother, and tossed it onto the table like trash. Kayla sat beside him, scrolling her phone. She didn't even pretend to look up when I walked in. I moved silently, my left hand bracing the kitchen doorway, my casted arm tucked close to my side. I felt like a ghost haunting her own home. I inhaled, slow and steady. The apartment smelled like sweat and wine and duck fat. Nothing clean. Nothing like the house I'd curated for years with the precision of a surgeon. I told her she could have some, but she refused, Damien said loudly, like I wasn't even in the room. You know how she gets when she's dramatic. A couple of the guests gave nervous laughs, not full ones, just enough to pretend they didn't hear the way his voice curled around the word dramatic like it was a slur. Marcus, my old neighbour, shifted in his chair. He looked at me, opened his mouth, then closed it. Like someone halfway to bravery before fear slams the door. I'm fine, I said to no one. But it wasn't true. I was famished. I hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. That empty plate, still sitting there in front of me, had become a symbol, not of hunger, but of erasure. Kayla finally looked up. Mum, she said flatly, if you're going to make a scene, maybe excuse yourself. I felt something crack inside me. Not bone, not skin, memory. The last time she called me Mom with love was 3 Christmases ago. Before Damien. Before this version of her. Before she started calling me Martha in emails. I took my seat slowly, every motion deliberate. Damien tilted his glass toward me. To discipline, he said, mocking again. And that's when the doorbell rang. Not a ding. A knock. Sharp. Measured. The whole room stilled. Marcus glanced toward the door. Kayla frowned. Damien smirked. "Must be for you," he said. "You inviting old friends to witness your martyrdom now?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. 3 seconds later, another knock. Then, "Martha Evans." 3 syllables. Calm. Precise. Delivered like a surgeon calling for a scalpel. Damien stood up, annoyed. He didn't even ask, just swaggered to the door and flung it open. The room went dead silent. Standing in the hallway, framed by the apartment's dim entry light, was Governor Elias Monroe, in a black wool coat, holding a bouquet of wild hydrangeas. Behind him, 2 men in sharp, clean suits. No visible weapons, but that wasn't necessary. Their silence was loaded enough. Damien's mouth twitched. "Can I help you?" Elias didn't even glance at him. He stepped inside without permission, breezing past Damien like he was walking around spilled coffee. The men followed him in, nodding briefly to me. Elias stopped when he reached the table. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I swear, for a moment, it felt like oxygen had returned to the room. He placed the bouquet on the table gently. Then, without hesitation, he pulled out a chair beside mine and dropped to one knee. On one knee. Not out of deference, not out of theatre, out of history, out of bond. He took my good hand in both of his. "I came as fast as I could," he said. "You said you fell, but you didn't tell me they were starving you too." I looked at him. There was nothing performative about Elias. Not tonight, not ever. He was the same man who once waded through chest-deep floodwater to carry a baby out of a collapsed maternity wing. "I'm here now," he said. Then he stood, rolled up his sleeves, and walked to the untouched platter of duck near the stove. Carefully, like a ritual, he plated a portion. A small one. Enough for dignity, not indulgence. He set it before me, picked up a clean fork, sat down again, and then, in front of everyone, he fed me. One small bite. Silent. Reverent. The room stopped breathing. That's when Kayla stood up abruptly. "What the hell is this?" Elias didn't look at her. He turned to Damien. "You said she fell." Damien stiffened. "She did." Elias pulled a manila folder from his coat and laid it flat on the table, opened it slowly. Inside, a printed X-ray, a photograph, and a notarized injury report. "She has a defensive fracture on her distal radius, not from a fall, from a forward block, the kind trained fighters sustain when protecting their heads. You don't get that from missing a step." Damien swallowed. "She attacked me." "I didn't say a word," I murmured. "But I did," Elias said. He turned to his men. "We begin tonight. Audit every property, every account, every document under Damien Cole's name. And any joint account with Kayla Evans." Kayla gasped. "I didn't—" She stammered. "I know," Elias said, his voice soft. "But you let it happen." Then he looked at me and smiled, just barely. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he said. I shook my head. "You came exactly when you needed to. I once watched a man's heart stop mid-sentence. Massive trauma. Ribs shattered. Blood in the pleural space. No warning. Just a second too late. And that was it. We cracked his chest open in Trauma Bay 4, bare hands in bone and sinew, trying to will life back into a body that had already said goodbye. I remember thinking, you don't always hear the moment everything changes. But tonight, I heard it. It was the second knock, not rushed, not aggressive, measured, as if time itself paused to listen. Then came the voice. "Martha Evans." Not a question, not a plea, a statement of fact. The moment Damien opened the door, I saw his posture change, just slightly. A shift in the shoulders, a millimeter of fear leaking through arrogance. His mouth opened, ready to throw out some sarcastic greeting. But then he froze. Because standing there wasn't a messenger, or a neighbor, or a cop. It was Elias Monroe, governor of Georgia, decorated military medic. One of the most powerful men in the Southeast. And once, 22 years ago, a man whose life bled out beneath my hands on a storm-slick rooftop. Now, he stood in my doorway in a black wool coat, holding a modest bouquet of wild blue hydrangeas. And behind him? 2 men in black suits. They didn't wear their badges. They didn't have to. Elias didn't say a word to Damien, didn't look at him, just stepped past, as if he were nothing more than a doorman. He walked toward me with the stillness of a man trained in triage, calm under fire, slow when everyone else is fast. That kind of stillness saves lives. It might have just saved mine. He reached the table and looked down at me. I didn't stand. I couldn't. Not physically, not symbolically. I needed him to see me in this state, not because I was weak, but because I wanted him to understand what had been done, not what was broken, but what had been taken. Dignity, autonomy, place. He set the flowers gently on the table. Then he did something no one in that apartment expected. He knelt. Not one leg, both, on the hardwood, in front of me. His eyes met mine, steady and quiet. "You said you fell," he said. "But you didn't tell me they were starving you." No one breathed. Damien hovered by the door, twitchy now, unsure whether to interrupt or vanish. Kayla had just stepped into the hallway from the guest room, her eyes wide and mascara smudged like she hadn't slept, or cried, or maybe both. I looked at Elias, then to the plate in front of me. Still empty. Still waiting. He stood, unhurried, walked to the serving table, lifted the lid of the silver tray, and with the precision of a field surgeon, cut a clean slice of duck. Not the chewed-up remnants Damien left behind, but the untouched side meant for the host. He plated it, added 2 asparagus spears, a spoonful of rice, nothing fancy. Then returned. He set the plate before me, placed a clean fork beside it. But I didn't move. So he picked up the fork and fed me. 1 bite. Not in shame, not in pity, but in absolute, unshakable respect. It was a surgical strike against humiliation, the opposite of violence, the surgical act of restoring worth. The silence that followed was not absence. It was awe, until Damien ruined it. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Elias didn't look at him. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulled out a slim folder, and dropped it on the table with a soft thud. Inside, an X-ray image, a photograph, a signed statement. He opened the folder and turned it to face Damien. "You said she fell." "She did fall," Damien shot back. Elias tapped the X-ray with his index finger. "That," he said, "is a distal radial fracture. Transverse. Blunt trauma impact from a forward defensive block. A classic nightstick break. You know who gets those?" Damien blinked. People defending their faces from being hit with fists or objects. Kayla swallowed hard. "I wasn't even there," Damien said. "You were," I said quietly. The weight of those words hit harder than a slap. Damien laughed, the panicked kind. "So what? You're going to arrest me? Based on an X-ray and some sympathy flowers?" Elias leaned in slightly, his voice even lower now. "No, I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to begin something much quieter, much slower, and much more painful." He turned to his men. Contact the district attorney's office. Begin a comprehensive audit of all financial activity linked to Damien Cole and any joint assets with Kayla Evans Cole. Retroactive 5 years. Start with the real estate titles. Pull the condo registration. Cross-check against reported income. Damien's face drained of colour. Kayla stepped forward. Wait. You can't just... I can, Elias said. And I will. You're doing this because she... What? Called in a favour? Elias turned his head slightly. That was the only time he looked directly at Damien. No, he said. I'm doing this because I owe her my life, and I don't like being in debt. He returned his gaze to me, and then, gently, softly, like we were the only 2 people in the room. You are not forgotten. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not a bone, not grief. Something older. A knot I didn't realize I'd tied around my own ribs. The kind that forms when you've spent decades swallowing the word help. He placed his hand briefly over mine. Eat, he said. You'll need strength. Then he stood up, turned back to his men, and gestured toward the hallway. We'll begin in the bedroom. Bring out every document, every key. As the men moved to comply, Elias remained at my side. He didn't look at the others. He didn't need to. They were no longer part of the room. He was here for me. And I? I finally took the second bite. I have looked at X-rays the way most people look at horoscopes, searching for patterns, signs, answers to questions they're too afraid to ask aloud. But that night, the one Elias held up wasn't just an image of bone. It was my truth. A clean fracture across the lower radius, the kind we call a nightstick break. Classic defensive injury. Textbook. 100 cases I've seen over the years. Women who raised their arms to protect their faces from men who claimed to love them. Now that X-ray had my name on it, my handwriting in the margin, my shame, illuminated in grayscale. Elias stood at the head of the table, holding the film beneath the light of the chandelier like a surgeon presenting evidence before a jury. His tone didn't waver. He didn't yell. That was the most terrifying thing. He didn't have to. This, he said, was not a fall. This is the result of a forward block motion, arm raised in defense against incoming force. He turned toward Damien slowly, like a man who already knew the verdict, but was giving the condemned one last look. You said she fell. You said she was clumsy. Damien scoffed. She is clumsy. She tripped in the kitchen. There are no stairs in this apartment. There's a lip between the hallway and no bruising on the knees, no hip trauma, no facial lacerations, no defensive scrapes on the palms. Elias cut in. Which means she didn't fall down. She was struck across. The room chilled. My fingers tightened against the edge of the table. The last time someone explained an injury like that, I was wearing scrubs and delivering bad news to a mother about her daughter's bruised ribs. I never thought the same diagnosis would come back to me, delivered not with a clipboard, but with justice. Damien tried to wave it off. I mean, who even ordered that X-ray? How do we know it's real? I did, Elias said. Under emergency evaluation clause. You're not listed as her legal guardian. You have no standing. He stepped forward, placing the film down in front of Damien, the glossy surface catching the flicker of candlelight. He tapped the fracture line with 2 fingers. She blocked a hit. Then he looked at me. You knew, didn't you? I met his eyes and nodded, because I had known. The moment I hit the floor, the way the bone gave, not with age, but with precision, like it was waiting for the last straw. Damien stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor behind him. So what? She's suddenly a victim now. All of you fall at her feet, Because she has an old friend in a fancy coat? He turned to the guests. She's manipulating you. She wants control. This whole thing is a performance. You don't know her like I do. And that's when I stood, slowly. My good hand braced against the table, my casted arm stiff by my side. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. You're right, I said softly. They don't know me like you do. He blinked, uncertain. They've never seen me lie on the kitchen floor with a broken wrist, wondering if my own daughter would step over me or help me stand. They've never seen me have to crawl, Damien, to reach a damn phone that I had hidden 20 years ago in case I was ever this helpless. My voice didn't tremble. It cut. They've never heard me scream without making a sound. Elias didn't interrupt. He let it land. And Damien? He tried to laugh again. That was his last instinct, to charm his way through blood. She's exaggerating. You know how dramatic. She's not, Elias said sharply. And we have more than testimony. He nodded to one of the men behind him, who opened a leather folio and produced a second document. Auditor's preliminary report, Elias said. Turns out Damien's not just an abuser, he's also a thief. The words dropped like stones into still water. Kayla gasped. What report? Elias continued, without mercy. Shell companies, hidden funds. This condo was fraudulently refinanced under a fake management firm that funnels rental income into an offshore account. Cayman Islands. Your name, Damien. Not Martha's, not Kayla's. Yours. Kayla turned to Damien, her face pale. You said it was just to simplify the paperwork. He said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Elias stepped forward. Here's what's going to happen, he said calmly. You'll be under investigation starting tonight. Your accounts are frozen. Your assets are being reviewed by the Attorney General. If you leave this building, you'll be followed. If you touch her again, you'll be buried, legally, financially, and publicly. Damien's eyes darted from face to face. No more allies, no more masks. He reached into his pocket. Elias's voice sharpened, slowly. But it was only a phone. Damien placed it on the table. I'll call a lawyer, he muttered. You'll need two, Elias replied. Criminal and federal. And then he turned to me. You okay? I nodded once. My throat was too dry for anything more. The silence in the room had changed. It was no longer oppressive. It was watching, waiting. The crowd had stopped pretending. No one reached for another bite of food. No one poured more wine. Kayla backed away slowly from Damien. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. I looked at her, then at the chair Damien had just vacated, David's chair, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the absence, not just of him, but of the life we built, the values, the quiet Sunday mornings, the way he would take my hand, without a word, and squeeze it when the world felt cruel. Damien sat in that chair and tried to own it, but that chair only belonged to someone who knew how to protect. And Damien? He only knew how to possess. I'd like him out, I said simply. Elias nodded. It's already in motion. And just like that, the fracture became the evidence, not just of what was broken, but of what would finally begin to heal. It started with a tremor, not in the ground, but in Damien's voice. He stood near the hallway door, his hands no longer confident, his posture slack. The man who once called himself protector of this home now looked like a boy trying to convince himself the dark wasn't real. You think you can come in here with a damn folder and ruin my life? He shouted. But it wasn't a roar. It was a rattle, a bluff that came too late. Elias remained silent. That silence was a scalpel, and Damien was bleeding from it. "I've worked for everything I have," he continued, pacing. "I built this family. I took care of Kayla. She wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for me." Kayla flinched. I didn't, because I'd heard it all before. That tone, that rhythm, that spiraling of words turning into weapons, flung blindly in every direction when a man realizes the walls are closing in. And this time, no one was shielding him from the consequences, not even Kayla. "Say something!" Damien barked at her. She didn't move. He turned to Elias. "You don't scare me." Still silence. Then Elias took one slow step forward, not threatening, not theatrical, just deliberate. "Sit down," he said. Damien froze. It was a command, not a request. The voice of a man used to giving orders in war zones and being obeyed without question. But Damien didn't sit. He lunged, straight at me. There wasn't a second to scream. Only the sound of a chair scraping back, a glass tipping, someone gasping. But he never reached me, because Elias moved faster. He stepped between us, one fluid motion, not dramatic, not forceful, and planted himself in Damien's path like a wall. His hands didn't go to fists, his arms didn't raise. He just stood, and said again, quieter, "Sit down." Something in Damien broke right then. The rage didn't vanish. It collapsed. His knees buckled. He dropped to the floor, palms down, like a man who'd just realized gravity applied to him after all. He didn't cry. That would have been too human. He just stared at the hardwood, breathing hard, like the world had gotten smaller and he couldn't find the door. I watched him for a long moment. This man who had broken my arm, mocked my hunger, tried to erase me in my own home. And now? He was no longer dangerous. He was finished. "Get up," I said. He looked at me. His face was pale, sweating. A boy caught sneaking out of class, except now the school was on fire and he was holding the match. I said, "Get up," I repeated. He stood slowly, unsure of his own legs. I took one step forward, and then I said it. Not with vengeance, but with something colder. "You broke the hand of a trauma surgeon for something that was never going to be yours." He blinked. "What?" I turned toward Elias, who gave me a small nod, quiet permission to do what I'd been preparing for all along. "The apartment," I said. "The condo you thought you could claim? The title you pressured me to sign?" I reached into the folder Elias had placed beside my plate and pulled out a slim, notarized document, raised it for the room to see. "This property was donated to the Grady Memorial Hospital Board 10 years ago. I retain full right of residency until my death, and not a single square foot of it is legally yours." Damien staggered. But the paperwork, the lease, was never in your name." I cut him off. "You were fighting for a throne that's already been bequeathed to public good. You thought you were stealing gold, Damien. But what you clawed for was dust." He stared at the document as if it were written in another language, and maybe, in a way, it was the language of accountability. Kayla sat back down slowly. She looked like someone who'd been unplugged. No tears, no protests, just silence. I turned to her next, and when I spoke, my voice didn't hold fury, only clarity. "You knew," I said, "and you stayed." She opened her mouth. "Mama?" "Don't," I said softly. I didn't know about the fake companies, or the offshore accounts, or the audit, or the shell firms. I swear. I didn't know about the money." "You didn't need to know the fraud," I replied. "You knew about me." That was the deepest cut. She flinched, and I saw it land. I lay on the floor for 15 minutes. You didn't call for help. You didn't bend down. You said I provoked him. I was scared, she whispered. I tilted my head. Of him? Or of becoming me? She didn't answer, because there was no answer that wouldn't break her further. Then, the moment I didn't see coming, she dropped to her knees, right there on the polished floor. Tears came, finally, real ones. Her hands reached for my cast. I'm sorry, she sobbed. He threatened me. I thought I could control it. I thought I could fix him. I looked down at the girl I once braided hair for before piano recitals. The girl I held the night David died. The girl who used to call me Mama like it meant safety. Now she was begging. But I didn't kneel. Not this time. I reached out, touched her hand, gently pulled it away from mine. I believe you were scared, I said. But you made a choice. Her breath caught, and I said it, simply. You stood beside him when I needed you in front of him. Her hands dropped. She didn't stand. She crumbled. Elias stepped forward quietly. Do you want them removed now? He asked me. I looked at Damien, at Kayla, then back at the room that used to be my home, now no longer desecrated but emptied. No, I said. Let them leave on their own. Elias nodded, and with that, Damien rose and walked out the door, silent as a man being exiled. Kayla followed, slower. At the threshold, she turned to me, her eyes full of something like regret or recognition. I didn't wave, I didn't speak, because I was done speaking to ghosts. Some men collapse like buildings, some rot from within, and some, like Damien Cole, crawl. It wasn't even dramatic. There was no shouting, no glass breaking. He didn't fall to his knees with a thunderclap or burst into some Shakespearean confession. He just buckled. One leg folded, then the other. Then his palms hit the floor like they were magnetized to it. His shoulders hunched inward, like his rib cage was trying to hide his own lungs. And then he moved, forward, inch by inch, crawling, toward me. Please, he whispered, voice grainy with defeat. Martha, please, you don't understand. Oh, but I did. I understood perfectly. I had seen that crawl before, in trauma bays, in detox units, in family court waiting rooms. I had seen men crawl toward women they'd torn open, whispering apologies that weighed less than the damage they'd done. But in this room, on my floor, under my roof, the act meant something different. He wasn't crawling toward remorse. He was crawling toward survival. I didn't mean to hurt you, he croaked. You know how it gets. People lose their temper. I was under pressure. I didn't want it to go that far. Each sentence landed like a child's drawing pinned to a crime scene. I watched him without blinking. His fingers scraped against the wood as he pulled himself toward the edge of the dining table. The same table where he once lifted a glass and toasted to discipline. The same one where I sat with a broken wrist and an empty plate, while he carved meat like a king. Martha, he said again, voice breaking, I need you to understand. This wasn't me. That wasn't me. I stepped back once. Just once. It was enough. He reached out with one hand, clutching the base of the chair nearest me, clutching like it might anchor him to the illusion that he still belonged here. You don't have to press charges, he murmured. We can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding, that we were all tired, that we got emotional. Got emotional. A phrase so spineless it made my teeth clench. Behind him, Kayla hadn't moved. She stood near the kitchen doorway, one hand resting on the wall like she needed help staying upright. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't blank. It was torn, and that, more than anything, made it worse. Damien turned his head, caught sight of her. "Kay," he rasped. "Baby, help me out here." He reached toward her now, abandoning his crawl to me. "You know me. You know me. I love you. I did everything for you. The condo, the investment, the future. This house. I was building it for us." I turned my gaze to Kayla. She didn't move. Her lips parted like she might say something, but she didn't. Her breath shook in her chest. She stared at him the way someone might look at a burning photograph, familiar and foreign all at once. He kept pleading. "Kay, please. I just need you to tell them it wasn't like that." He paused, voice suddenly sharper. "Don't leave me here. Don't do this." And finally, Kayla spoke. Her voice was so soft I almost missed it. "You already left me, Damien. You just never walked out." The silence that followed was colder than any slap. He blinked, but she didn't look at him. She looked at me, and when she did, her entire body folded. She stepped forward, hesitant, like she was approaching the grave of something she herself had buried. She moved toward me, not Damien. Her hands trembled. "I didn't know how to stop it," she said. At first I thought it was just pressure. Then it became normal, and by the time I realized it wasn't, I didn't know how to undo any of it. She stopped a few feet away. "Mama." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." I didn't answer, not because I hadn't heard her, but because the apology came with too many shadows attached. "I let it happen," she said. "I didn't raise a hand, but I watched you fall, and I watched him eat while you sat there hungry, and I said nothing." She stepped closer. "I thought if I kept him calm, he wouldn't spiral. I thought if I stayed between you two, I could protect you both." She looked at me now, eyes glossy and wide, face streaked with tears. But all I did was disappear. She reached out, and I stepped back. Because love is not memory, and motherhood is not immunity. "You told me," I said quietly, "to sit down and shut up, that I was embarrassing you." She nodded, tears falling harder. "I said awful things. I thought I was protecting the life I built. But it wasn't mine, was it? It was his." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't even recognize myself anymore." "I do," I said. She blinked, hopeful. "I recognize the part of you that's still pretending to be helpless." Her breath caught. "You're not a child anymore," I continued. "You don't get to call me Mama only when you're afraid. You don't get to break something and then crawl into my arms." She dropped to her knees, begging without saying the word. "I want to come home," she whispered. "I want to be yours again." I knelt too, not in surrender, but in dignity, so she could see me, eye to eye, nothing above, nothing below. I took her hand. "I never stopped loving you," I said, "but love does not excuse betrayal." She broke. Her body shook with sobs. And for the first time, I didn't reach to comfort her. Because sometimes pain has to teach. Sometimes we have to feel the floor before we remember how to stand. "You're going to have to live with the fact," I said softly, "that you stood on the wrong side." She nodded, still crying. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I will not invite you back into the room where you silenced me." And then I let go of her hand. She stayed on her knees, not begging anymore, just broken. Damien watched all of this from the far corner now, no longer crawling, no longer speaking, just slumped against the wall. Elias appeared behind me. "They're ready," he said. I stood. "Let them walk out." "You're sure?" I nodded. "I don't want revenge. I said. I want them to feel what silence really is. And as they left, Damien dragging his shame behind him, Kayla cradling her guilt like a wound, I didn't follow. I didn't watch them go, because I was already beginning the process I knew best. Cut, clean, close. I thought the worst had already left. That when Damien and Kayla walked out of my door, her cheeks tear-streaked, his pride leaking with every step, that the infection had been cut out. I was wrong. It turns out, when you pull up a weed by its roots, you often discover it's been feeding off something much deeper, something buried, something hidden beneath decades of silence and floorboards. It started with a sentence. One of Elias's men approached him just as the air in the apartment began to settle. He leaned in and whispered. Elias straightened instantly. His body didn't tense, but his gaze sharpened. What kind of lock? He asked. Magnetic? Reinforced? No registry. Utility access behind the freight shaft. I didn't know what that meant at first, until Elias looked at me. You have a private storage unit downstairs? I blinked. No, just the standard cage, half empty, mostly old files. He nodded slowly, then turned to his team. Take us there. Now. The freight elevator was colder than I remembered. Maybe because it was descending into something I hadn't seen in 20 years. Maybe because the walls suddenly felt like they were watching. Or maybe because this time I wasn't being taken down for storage. I was being taken down for surgery. The kind you don't prep for. The kind where you find the tumor after you already closed the wound. The corridor was grey concrete, lit by single overhead bulbs that flickered like they were unsure of their own purpose. Pipes ran along the walls. A smell hit me before the door did. Not strong, but wrong. Industrial. Synthetic. Tainted. The door was metal, painted black. No apartment number, no marker, just a keypad. Already pried open, wires exposed. One of the agents looked at Elias. We're good. He nodded, and they opened it. The room beyond was the kind of thing you see in documentaries and think, that must be exaggerated. It wasn't. Tables, stacked with chemical containers, pill presses, vacuum sealers. Duct-taped bricks of powder lined the shelves. Tools, bags, butane canisters, syringes in sterile packs still sealed. This wasn't a stash. This was production. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Because the world had shifted again, and I needed a moment to understand gravity. Meth precursors, the agent said. Also benzodiazepine traces, possibly fentanyl. We won't know exact composition until the lab. But this... He looked at me, almost apologetic. This is federal. I walked in, slow. The floor was sticky in places, not visibly, but I could feel it under the soles of my shoes. Residue, the kind that seeps into your walls, into your lungs, into your legacy. Whose name is this unit under? I asked. The agent flipped a clipboard. Property listed to Brigham Consolidated Logistics, Delaware Shell, paper trail traces back to Damien Cole. Elias cursed under his breath. I just stood there, breathing the same air as whatever he'd built beneath my feet. He didn't just steal my daughter, I thought. He stole my home. I walked deeper into the room. At the back was a desk, cheap, particle board, still organized like he'd intended to come back. A burner phone sat on top. Next to it, a notebook, ledger entries, street names, weight notations, and under that, a manila envelope. Inside, photos of Kayla. On the balcony, in the kitchen, at the dining table, marked, circled, numbered, like she was being tracked, like she was being used. Elias came up behind me. I'm sorry, he said, but I wasn't listening, because beneath the photos was something worse, a lease, drafted under Kayla's name, a second version of my unit's deed, forged, with fake notarization stamps. A plan, in motion, to erase me on paper, even before Damien tried to erase me in person. It wasn't just manipulation. It was a long game. And Kayla. She'd stood next to it the entire time. I felt my breath catch in my throat, not like a gasp, but like a final intake before surgery begins. Elias took the folder, sealed it in an evidence bag. His team started cataloguing, measuring, bagging, photographing. And I watched. Not because I needed proof, but because I needed to see how far the infection had spread. Back upstairs, the apartment was quiet again. Not just quiet. Still. The kind of stillness that follows a storm too large to comprehend. I sat in David's old chair. My hand rested on the cast. The pain in my wrist had dulled, but not disappeared. It pulsed, a quiet reminder that healing is slow and incomplete. Elias sat across from me. He didn't speak right away. Let the air settle. Let the silence stretch. Then he said, "We'll have full detail reports by morning. DEA will take over. Your name's been cleared from all connection to the unit." I nodded, but the words didn't comfort me. Because this wasn't about legality. This was about legacy. He saw it on my face. "You couldn't have known," he said. "I should have," I replied. I spent 40 years diagnosing tumours faster than most people read CTs. But I didn't see this. I let him in. "You trusted," Elias said simply. "That's not a failure. That's a scar you earn from being human." I almost smiled. Almost. Then I asked, "What happens to it all? The equipment? Destroyed? The product? Confiscated? The story? That depends on the press." "No," I said. "I mean the apartment, the space." He paused. "Whatever you want." I stood slowly. "I want it back." "Done?" But I shook my head. "I don't mean the paperwork. I mean the smell, the shadow, the stain. I want it gone." Elias rose. "Then we clean it." And so we did. Not with bleach, not with chemicals, but with presence. Every light turned on, every curtain opened, windows cracked, air moving. Elias rolled up his sleeves, took the trash out himself, folded linens, burned every towel that had been touched. His team packed Damien's clothes into black bags. Anything branded with his breath was exiled from the room. And me? I stayed barefoot, because I needed to feel the ground again. By the time the sun started to rise, the apartment was no longer a crime scene. It was a room, a scarred room, but mine. It was just after 6 when the last agent closed the door behind him. The latch clicked, soft, unceremonious, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, the apartment was empty. Not abandoned, not occupied, just empty. No shouting, no leather shoes scraping against hardwood, no heavy perfume clinging to the hallway like a threat. Just space, just air. I stood in the center of the living room, barefoot, and turned a slow circle. Everything smelled like lemon oil and fresh cotton, like bleach and coffee, like something had been reset. My body ached in places I didn't have names for anymore. Not just the arm, though the cast felt heavier than ever, but in the neck, the knees, the curve of my spine. A dull ache that comes not from injury, but from endurance. The sun had crept up behind the windows, pale, forgiving. I stepped into the dining room, the same table, the same chairs, but they didn't feel like cages anymore. They felt like options. And on the plate in front of me, a single slice of red velvet cake, not homemade, not perfect. The kind of cake you buy on a whim, not out of celebration, but out of claim. There was no audience, no dinner guests, No daughter watching with narrowed eyes. No man sitting where my husband once belonged. Just me. And a fork. Elias came from the kitchen. He had shed his jacket. His sleeves were rolled. His tie hung loose around his neck, like he'd finally allowed himself to exhale. He carried 2 cups of coffee. Strong. No cream. The way I'd taught him back in 1994, when he was just a young ER intern with shaking hands and too much hope in his voice. He placed one beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for the fork. My left hand trembled at the wrist, unsure. It wasn't made for this, not trained, not rehearsed. This was the hand that steadied incisions, that held retraction tools, that braced during CPR. It had always been the assistant, never the one in charge. But today, it would lead. I picked up the fork. Slow, deliberate. The metal was cool against my palm. I cut a piece. Small. Clean. I lifted it to my lips. The bite was too sweet. The frosting was too thick. The texture, a little dry. And I chewed it like it was the finest meal I'd ever had. Because it was the first thing I'd fed myself in this house in almost a year. And that meant something. I felt Elias watching me. Quiet. Patient. I took another bite, then another, until half the slice was gone, until my hand didn't shake anymore, until the apartment didn't feel like a battlefield, it felt like a room. Elias broke the silence. "It's good to see you eat." I swallowed, then spoke, not to him, but more to the air between us. "I thought if I lost this hand," I nodded at the cast, "I'd lose everything. My work, my precision, my place." He waited. "But I was wrong," I said. "I didn't lose my hands. I lost my voice, my footing, my boundaries. And I let it happen one polite silence at a time." Elias leaned forward. "And now?" I looked up at him and said it. "Now I'm the surgeon, not of others, of myself. And this," I held up the fork, "is the scalpel." He smiled, but didn't speak. He didn't need to, because we both knew what this was. Not a dinner, not revenge, not even closure. This was the reclaiming of space, of choice, of voice. The hours blurred gently after that. Elias helped me open windows. I burned the last of Damien's documents in the fireplace. He offered to call a truck, to haul away the couch he liked best. I said no. I wanted to live with its ugliness for a while, as a reminder. A scar on the fabric of the room, the same way betrayal leaves a bruise on your trust. We didn't speak about Kayla, not yet. Some wounds don't scar until weeks later, and some truths you have to let breathe before they can be spoken. But he asked, before he left, standing at the doorway with his keys in hand, "Will you be okay?" I didn't lie. I said, "I don't know, but I'll be whole." Because wholeness and happiness aren't the same. And sometimes being whole means learning how to live with absence. It means setting a table for one and not apologizing for the quiet. It means walking through your own front door and not shrinking from the echo. It means choosing stillness and not calling it loneliness. It means, finally, taking up space in your own life. I sat alone that evening. The cake was gone. The fork lay beside the empty plate, and I found myself reaching for a pen. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out an old notebook, the kind I used to use during residency to jot notes between cases. I flipped past pages filled with patient charts, trauma scores, drug doses, and on a clean page I wrote, "Surgeons are trained to cut away what threatens life, but no one teaches you how to cut away what threatens the soul. I know now. You do it gently, Precisely, and without apology. Then I closed the notebook and pressed my palm against the cover. I thought of every patient I'd ever stitched back together, and how few times I'd stopped to ask whether I, too, deserved healing. Now I knew. Healing isn't always a miracle. It's a discipline, a choice. And today, I chose myself. Later that night, I walked out onto the balcony. The sky above Atlanta was smeared with city light and distant thunderclouds, but somewhere in between, I spotted a single star, a pinprick of stubborn light. I took a breath, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I exhaled without pain. And then, after all the pain, betrayal, and the silence swallowed in darkness, Martha Evans did not seek justice through blood, but through awakening. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't seek revenge with blades, but with a calm gaze, a slow bite of cake with her left hand, and one final sentence that froze the entire room. To save your own soul, sometimes you have to perform surgery on your own heart. This story isn't about a woman who won. It's about a woman who dared to rise, unapologetic for having survived.